Today we are moving to the part of history. Chapter 3, the Delhi Sultans. In the last chapter, we have seen the Kaveri Delta become the center of many kingdoms. But in this chapter, at that time, it was not mentioned about the Delhi because the Delhi was not in the capital of at that time of any dynasties. Delhi became an important commercial center. Many Jain merchants were lived there, and there is also they have minted coins. We know that the coins for the purpose of exchanging goods. So they have minted coins, or they made the coins. It was known as Delhi wall. It was known as the coin which was used in the Delhi Sultanate at first was known as Delhi wall. We can just look the rulers of the Delhi. There were 5 dynasties were there in the Delhi. The first one were Mamluk dynasty, that means slave dynasty. Then early, they were known as early Turkish rulers. Qutbuddin Aybak was the first one, and after him, Shamsuddin Iltutmish become in the throne. Then becomes Iltutmish's daughter Razia Begum. Then Ghiyasuddin Balban. After Ghiyasuddin Balban, the Khilji dynasty were there in the Delhi. Jalaluddin Khilji was the founder of Khilji dynasty. After him, Alauddin Khilji came. Then comes the Tughlaq dynasty. Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq was the founder of the Tughlaq dynasty. After him, the successors Muhammad bin Tughlaq, Firoz Shah Tughlaq. After them, the Said dynasty became the ruler of Delhi. Kisirgan was the main ruler of Said dynasty. Then comes the Lodi dynasty. Bahlul Lodi was the famous ruler of the Lodi dynasty. These are the important rulers or the dynasties of Delhi Sultanate. The Delhi Sultans built many buildings surrounding the Delhi that we are seeing in the city Delhi, and from about them we are getting information from the inscriptions what they have wrote in the walls and the coins and the architecture that built they have surrounded the Delhi. And in these dynasties, Tariq and Tawarik are the language of administration under Delhi Sultanates. That means their administrative language was Tariq and Tawarik. The authors of Tawarik were learned men. They were secretaries of rulers or the administratives, poets and courtiers. They were advising the rulers on governance or emphasizing the importance of rule for the king. This is the important duty of these Tawarik in the dynasties. The famous Persian literature Fakhr-i-Mudabir wrote in the 13th century that a king cannot survive without soldiers and soldier cannot live without salaries. Salaries come from the revenue collected from peasants, but peasants can pay revenue only when they are prosperous and happy. This happens when the king promotes justice and honest governance. It shows that it's a circle of justice, he says, and it shows the ruler should do take or promote justice and honest to all the people, those who are living in that country. The authors of Tawarik lived in the cities, and they have often wrote their histories for sultans, the hope of rich rewards. That means for the purpose of getting money or reward, they have write about the history of the king. And these authors advise the rulers about the birthright and gender distinctions, about the social order. These things they have advised the king, and for the purpose of getting money also they have used these writings. The Razia Sultana, the daughter of Iltutmish, in 1236 Sultan Iltutmish's daughter Razia Sultana became the Sultan of dynasty. The chronicler Minhaj-i-Siraj says about that she was a qualified than her brothers. That is, Iltutmish was having other son also, and comparing them, Razia was the good one to become the Sultan. So, after Iltutmish, her daughter Razia Sultana, Razia Begum become the Sultan, and in 1240, that means around 4 years, she became the ruler of this dynasty, and she was thrown out from the reign of ruling this dynasty in 1240. We can look what Minhaj-i-Siraj thought about Razia. Minhaj-i-Siraj thought that the queen's rule went against the ideal social order created by God, in which women were supposed to be subordinate to men. He therefore asked her, in the register of God's creation, since her account did not fall under the column of men, how did she gain from all of her excellent qualities? On her inscriptions and coins, Razia mentioned that she was the daughter of Sultan Iltutmish. This was in contrast of the Queen Rudrama Devi of the Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal, part of modern Andhra Pradesh. Rudrama Devi changed her name on her inscriptions and pretended she was a man. Another queen, Daida, ruled in Kashmir. Her title is interesting. It comes from Didi or elder sister, and obviously affectionate term given to a loud ruler by her subjects. It shows that Minhaj-i-Siraj was saying about some of the lady rulers in the dynasties and the kingdoms.
Greetings, noble warrior.
Greetings from the Delhi Sultanate. I am Marhan.
I'm eager to know about the Delhi Empire. Could you tell me something about it?
I am a soldier. I will only be able to tell you about military conquest and expansion of the Sultanate.
Sounds cool.
Until the early 13th century, the Delhi Sultanate only had control over garrison towns.
What are garrison towns?
They are fortified towns occupied by soldiers.
Wow. So the Delhi Sultans had full control of garrison towns, huh?
Actually, no. The problem was that the sultans were not able to control the hinterlands of garrison towns.
Hinterlands?
Yes. They are lands next to a city or port that supply it with goods and services.
So if the sultans controlled hinterlands, they would have access to a lot of goods.
Correct. But since they did not control hinterlands, the sultans had to depend on trade, tribute, and even plunder for supply of goods.
What was stopping the sultans from expanding their control?
Communication between Delhi and garrison towns in far-off places like Bengal was very difficult. Bad weather and war would snap communication routes. There were other problems like Mongol invasions. The Mongols attempted to invade India frequently. The Sultanate had no option but to counter these attacks.
I see. All of this made expansion of the Delhi Sultanate difficult. You look tired, Arhan. Why don't you have a seat? After all, you aren't working right now.
That is very kind of you. Thank you. I have been working very hard.
So when did the Sultanate finally manage to expand its empire?
The empire was expanded during the reigns of Ghiyasuddin Balban, Alauddin Khilji, and Muhammad Tughlaq.
How did they manage to expand the empire?
Expansion occurred both internally and externally.
Internally? Externally?
Don't worry. I will explain them to you one by one. In order to expand the empire internally, the sultans gained control of the hinterlands. Forest lands around the Ganga-Yamuna belt were cleared and hunter-gatherers were removed from there.
Removed?
Yes, but the lands were given to peasants so that cultivation could be carried out. This would help promote regional trade.
So the sultans were trying to make their towns prosperous?
That's right. The sultans also built new towns and fortresses and ensured that trade routes were well protected. Now, let me tell you how the empire expanded externally. For the external expansion, military expeditions were carried out in South India.
Were these carried out by the sultans you mentioned earlier?
The military expeditions began with Alauddin Khilji and ended with Muhammad Tughlaq. Sultanate armies captured elephants, horses, slaves, and collected precious metals from the cities that they seized.
So in this way, the Sultanate was successful in expanding the empire externally?
Yes, the Delhi Sultanate, which was so small, became a very powerful empire by the 14th century. What's that sound all about?
It's the church bell ringing. It says it's 6 p.m. now.
6 p.m.? It means sunset. I must leave for my namaz at the masjid now.
Namaz?
Namaz is the prayer that Muslims recite together in the masjid.
What's a masjid?
You have heard of a mosque, haven't you? A mosque is called a masjid in Arabic.
You had mosques in the 14th century?
During the expansion of the Delhi Sultanate, several mosques were built by the rulers.
How would that help the Sultanate?
The sultans wanted to show that they were protectors of Islam. That is why they built so many mosques.
Was there any other reason for the prevalence of mosques?
Mosques also created the feeling of a community among followers of Islam who shared the same beliefs and code of conduct.
I don't understand.
You see, Muslims came from a variety of backgrounds, and the sultans believed that mosques would create a feeling of unity.
I see. Are there any famous mosques?
Of course, there are the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque, the Mot Ki Masjid, and the Begumpuri Mosque, to name a few. I better leave now, otherwise I will be late.
All right. It was great meeting you, Arhan.
Dear students, in today's class, we have seen about the different sources of information about the Delhi Sultans and Razia Sultana and the expansion of Delhi Sultanate, how it happened. So, the rest of the chapter we will see in the next class.